Okay, so I've talked quite a lot about the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex, and that limited tank of energy. So let's answer a question now that I get quite a lot. Well, if the energy might run out, will run out at some point during the day, how would I know? What should I be looking out for? What are the signs that my prefrontal cortex isn't functioning very well anymore and it's run out of juice? And it's a brilliant question to be asking. And in fact, what we're going to be talking about has a posh scientific name. It's called ego depletion. So when the energy for the smart thinking rational part of the brain is kind of depleted for the day, it's got a fancy term, and that's ego depletion. And some of the signs that we might become aware of are simply those that would indicate that we no longer have ready access to the kind of services that the prefrontal cortex would usually provide. So they kind of give us a clue as to what are we going to be missing and what might be noticed as a consequence. So one of the very first things people will talk about, and you've maybe even heard yourself saying this, is I just can't think about that right now. That kind of concept that, try as you might, you just can't quite seem to muster the energy to get it together internally to actually really think about something at a moment in time, especially if that something is difficult or complicated, or it's requiring you to come up with an answer as a result of that. So that might be one of the very first things that you notice, is that the simple inability to actually concentrate. A lot of folks will talk about finding it a lot harder to focus, that your brain is much more keen to sort of follow various distractions rather than actually do any work, if you like, do that thinking. It's much more keen to not, and therefore far more likely to be easily distracted, whether that's by its own internal distractions or external distractions, suddenly finding other things that are going on around it infinitely more fascinating than it would perhaps have done earlier on in the day. The other things we might notice when the prefrontal cortex has run out of juice, when we're ego depleted, are around the sort of making ourselves do things or stopping ourselves from doing things. So either willpower related sort of things, making us act even though perhaps we don't really want to, we know we should, so we will, or not acting, even though we know we probably shouldn't, we do it anyway. And so again, one of the things you might notice if you're feeling ego depleted is it's a lot harder to go for that run, to go for that walk, to make yourself do the thing that you know you really should, but you just don't have the energy to force it through, and therefore it doesn't happen. Of course, it's also a lot easier to do some of the things that we know we shouldn't be doing or we don't want to be doing, raiding the fridge, perhaps being a little bit more nippy than maybe we might have been earlier on in the day because we've simply run out of patience, run out of the energy to be patient, and therefore we're more impatient, we're more easily irritated. These kind of things we might very well notice as well. This is going to be a unique formula to you. So it's worth just tuning in and paying attention, beginning to notice what happens for you. Those are some of the common themes, but your particular version of that will be yours. So I would suggest the next step is just begin to notice, as you feel a little more tired, what happens next. And that's going to allow you to get better at spotting a tired prefrontal cortex any time in the day. And once you've noticed, well, you can begin to take steps to perhaps take better care of what happens next. If we know we're tired, then perhaps it's not worth continuing to stare at that task or that screen. Maybe it would actually be better to give the brain a little break and go for a walk, go out in the fresh air, take exercise, because that might give you a little boost. It might also allow you to extend some kindness and compassion to yourself. Maybe now is not the right moment to make that really difficult decision. Maybe it would be better placed somewhere else. Of course, we might also want to think that, yes, we might find it a little more difficult to make ourselves do those things we'd like to do later on in the day. So we could take steps to make them actually easier, have our shoes ready waiting for us if we wanted to go out for a run, or if we weren't wanting to raid the fridge, perhaps having a healthy meal ready in the precise place that we need it to stop us from reaching for the chocolate or the biscuits, and instead have something healthier instead. Of course, when it comes to things like being irritable and all of that kind of stuff, that's just worth being aware of, so that perhaps we can have slightly better governance of ourselves in those moments, rather than accidentally saying something or doing something and then later wishing we'd be able to hold our tongue. Overall, forewarned is forearmed, and the better prepared we are, the more knowledgeable and aware we are, the more choice we have to do something about it. So I hope that's useful to you. Just a few things to give you an idea so that you can track when you are ego depleted, and perhaps take some steps to eke out that energy just a little longer, or ensure that you're still functioning well even when you've run out of juice.